Welcome everybody, I'm Del Hungerford with Healing Frequencies Music, and I have another fun video today about some ancient bells that were found in China that are dated to the time of Pythagoras. There is a link to the blog post that goes with this video below, and all of the sources that I've used in this presentation are also in that blog post, so be sure to check it out. Without further ado, we're going to share screen, because you know I love PowerPoint presentations. For all of you visual people, why is it not working? There we go. It is going to work, I promise. Okay. Now let's go from the beginning. It's as we say, it's a very good place to start. Draw the curtain back. And it's called the Ancient Bells of China. And I'm not sure, but I think it's Marquis of Zeng. He was the Marquis and his name was Yi, and he lived in the area of Zeng. And these are some bells that he had made for him. And I'm going to move me way up to the top. So they were discovered in 1978 in the Zeng region of China. They are in excellent condition and are not damaged. They're dated around the time of 433 BC, and they are a set of 65 tuned bronze bells. So let's learn a little bit more about them. Now, again, one of the things that I always purport here is when I present stuff, I make sure I have good resources. And when it comes to music, you need to make sure that you get it from people who understand how music is done. So they have to read music. They have to understand music theory at a very high level, probably master's degree, to really be able to put some of these things together, unless you are a composition major. Then it would be slightly different, because you learn things that, like me as a performer, didn't pay any attention to in college because I'd rather spend time in a practice room. And now I'm going back and relearning some of this stuff. I get all the information from this video, and the blog post came from musicologists. Musicologists are musicians who have a doctoral degree in music. They generally major in history, and they're PhDs. So you notice at the first screen I have a DMA. Well, that is a performance degree. They're both music degrees, but our emphasis are different. Musical acoustic specialists, who are also PhDs, they read music and understand the physics of music. So they're going into more of the math of music, how instruments are made, why they're made, where you put the tone holes, what's the math for doing all these things on all the instruments. They go into that stuff. The musicologists are going to go into the history and look at the ancient instruments and figure out tunings. And so these guys will work together quite a bit. But the interesting thing is musical acoustic specialists are often also musicians. At least all of the ones that I've spoken with tend to be musicians. Reliable sources for technical musical details must come from those who read music and understand music theory. There's a lot of information out there that's about certain frequencies, it's about pitches and all of this stuff coming from people who don't know anything about music. And more than likely that information is going to have some stuff that needs adjusting. Musicologists generally work in large museums or they teach in universities. In fact, I don't know any musicologist that is working in any other place other than one of those two. A lot of times the people who are musicologists will teach the music history classes, and in some cases some would teach music theory. Generally composition majors teach theory. Anyway, moving on. Music enthusiasts are people who might play, or musicians, but they don't read music, or they read music very little, or are non-musicians who study music history. There are a lot of people out there who are calling themselves musicologists and music historians, but aren't musicians, or are musicians but don't read music. Most popular musicians, most rock musicians, most worship team musicians don't read sheet music. And unless they've got a music degree, chances are the stuff that we're talking about in here, they're not going to have those details. There's nothing wrong with that, but I want to make sure that I get my sources from people who understand this material at a really deep level. Moving along. Here's the details of the bells. I gave you that so you know that where I got my sources. Everything from this whole thing came from musicologists. So the bells are tuned in both thirds and fifths. The tuning focus was on pure thirds, not on pure fifths. The bells are based on a 12-tone system other than equal temperament. And I'll explain that in a minute, how that is. The Zeng bells have 6 main tones and 6 accidentals, which are sharps and flats. So when you hear the word accidentals, we're talking about sharps and flats. There's only one complete chromatic 12-tone scale in the entire set. I think they say there's 5 octaves. 3 further octaves have 4, 3, and 2 accidentals. The tuning of the entire set hovers around the concert pitch of A equals 426.6 hertz, which means the A above middle C is going to ring at about 426.6 hertz. Now, whether they were actually tuned off of that A, I doubt it, because A wasn't the standard 2,500 years ago. The temperament is a combination of Pythagorean and just intonation, but is playable with instruments in equal temperament. Now, temperament is where you're adjusting the distance between the notes. Are the major thirds pure? Are the minor thirds pure? Are the fifths pure? Are the fourths pure? You know, at what point do they adjust the distances? That's all temperament. Sources for this presentation are in the blog post, and I want to make sure, I think I said that, but I'm reiterating it. And there's some videos where you actually get to hear the bells, and I have pictures of the bells in the blog post, but not in this presentation. And again, the link to the blog post that complements this is in the description below this. So we're going to one of the musicologists' chart who was able to, I don't know how they got this, but there's several performances and people playing the bells. So any decent musicologist, all they have to do is pull out a tuner and figure out what the pitches are. So here is the left side. You know, they're kind of like in a C shape. So the left side, here's the 3 octaves. The middle side, here's the 3 octaves. And the right side, here's the 3 octaves. And you can see this 6 bell set. Now this tells you that this particular bell plays 2 notes, because some of them are double notes. But you're going to notice there's 12 notes here, but they're not all half steps all together. Here is a full step, D to E. Here's a half step, half step, half step. All of these are half steps except for the first 2 and the last 2. So they don't match what's on the piano. They still have the 12 pitches, but they're not in the same order as you find them on the piano. Okay, moving along. So let's look at some cultural history of how this all came about. Because, you know, you got the time of Pythagoras. He lived in Greece. Then you've got these Chinese bells, which were made some 62 years later, all the way in China. Do they connect? Let's find out. Because we know that Pythagoras died in around 495 BC, and the Zeng bells are dated around 433 BC, give or take a few years. It is known that China traded silk with Greece during this time. There was a huge trade of goods, but they also traded ideas. So I have to ask myself, who discovered it? Was it really Pythagoras, or did the Chinese discover it first and they shared ideas? We don't know that. Or I don't know that. Let's put it that way. Pythagorean tuning is based on the tuning of fifths using simple ratios for octaves, fifths, and fourths. So what's going to happen is when piano tuners, what they'll do, they'll go up to a piano, they're going to decide what their starting note is, which now is A. That's your starting note. So you're going to tune the A above middle C, then you're going to go down a perfect fifth lower, then you're going to go down a perfect fifth lower from that note. So I have to get my brain moving. So perfect fifth lower than A is D. So then you're going to tune that D, and then you're going to go down to the G. And then you just tune fifths down and up until you got a couple of octaves, at least one note in every octave. I mean, one note, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, tuned. and all the sharps and flats in between. Then you just tune all the other octaves, lower and higher, to those two. And that might not make sense, but that's how they tune pianos. And that's how they tune everything else. And I've got several blog posts that show how they tuned. So the tuning system was used, this Pythagorean tuning system was used for 1,500 years, from the time of Pythagoras till the 16th century AD, upon the invention of keyboard instruments, which were fixed pitch and meant you couldn't make adjustments, just like the Zeng bells. Those are fixed pitch. You can't change the tuning. Keyboards, well, you can now, but the harpsichord, you would have to go in and adjust all the, you had to adjust it every time you wanted to change keys, pretty much. Guido of Arezzo comes along in 1000 AD, and he uses this Pythagorean scale, but calls the first note ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, etc., etc. And in the Kang bells, the starting pitch is a D and ends on with the C. But we don't know that the D was the actual main note. Did they tune from the D first? We don't know. I think at least one of the musicologists suggests it was the F, which is right above middle C. And Guido used this scale in his hymn to St. John the Baptist. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more things. Here is a version of the hymn to St. John the Baptist. Now, what Guido did, because we know that they used Pythagorean tuning at that time, which we know now has been around since at least 433 BC. Because we have bells that we can measure the pitch, we can measure the frequencies, and we know what the pitches are. And we know that they're going to be somewhere in, I think it's a mix between just intonation and Pythagorean, and there's even some little snippets of equal temperament in there, which tells you they had a couple of different tuning systems. So, for example, the whole point of Guido of Arezzo was to take the plainchant, which had always been taught by rote. It took the monks 10 years to learn the plainchant, made it into sheet music, and then used solfege to teach them how to do it. So, for example, all I would have to do in this particular one, and I'm not going to sing, the Latin because you'd laugh. But anyway, so I'm going to establish my pitch. Let's say we'll pretend like this is do or ut in this case, and I'm just going to sing da 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 ba da 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 da, and I'm going to stop on that word. Now, because I've had lots of training, I can look at this and I can sight sing it. I just sight sing it for you. I think that's the first time I've ever tried to do that. But that's what solfege does. It teaches you to sing according to the intervals. This is made up of major seconds, minor thirds. There's a perfect fourth leap here. There's a perfect fifth leap there. So, looking at that, now we are going to compare the hymn to St. John the Baptist with the Zeng bells. Look at this first octave. And this looks like it's D6 to C7, so this is really high. Look at those, D, E, F, G, A, and C. The only difference between this and the hymn to St. John the Baptist is the C is on top over here rather than on the bottom. But it's the same scale. Now do note that we use movable do, meaning if you're singing in the key of C, C is do. If you're singing in the key of F, F is do. If you're singing in the key of G, G is do. Solfege is all about singing intervals. And you adjust those intervals through temperament. Just intonation, Pythagorean, equal temperament, Kirkler, I can't remember how you say it. There's so many various temperaments that they used. But I described that in a whole bunch of other videos. Now we're going to move on to what started this whole conversation, because I had a discussion with one of the musicologists because a friend of his had found the ancient solfeggial frequencies, read one of my articles, and came to ask me about them. And I've done several blog posts and even videos on the ancient solfeggial frequencies, so just look for them in the YouTube on this channel, because if you're watching this video, you're on my channel. So just look for them. I have a whole playlist of the ancient solfeggial frequencies. But some dude named Joseph Puleo, he had a vision. He was directed to scripture, Numbers 7, verses 12 through 83. And an angel directed him there. The angel said, there's a secret code in this. And Puleo thought the code was related to music because he found a writing of this musicologist named Willie Apple. He quotes him in his book, The Biological Apocalypse, and there's some other words after it that he wrote with Leonard Horowitz. And he used that to support his theory that it was a musical code. And reading the quote that he used of Willie Apple's, I'm like, it doesn't make sense how you came up to that conclusion. But again, Puleo was not a musician. So we'll leave it at that. Now, let's take a look at a couple other things. So this led me to a problem. We have a problem here. We have a problem in River City. Sing along now. So Puleo's frequencies found in the Book of Numbers don't fit within any scale known to society. So I'm leaving the hymn to St. John the Baptist here again. The Zeng bells prove that Pythagorean tuning and just intonation were used as early as 433 BC, because the bells are tuned and we can measure them. Puleo and Horowitz said the code found in the Bible was in the hymn to St. John the Baptist. Puleo never checked the specific frequencies for their exact pitch, but he did this in 1972, and yes, we had tuners. They were older, but you could still check the tuning. But see, again, him being a non-musician, he wouldn't have known to do that. That was the first thing I did when someone sent me the frequencies. So now let's look at them. Here's the Pythagorean scale versus Puleo's scale. So here's ut, because remember I said you can have movable do, ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. It's all in a stepwise motion. All scales are stepwise motions. Now, here is a half step between the E and F, and a half step between the B and C. All right, so most scales other than the pentatonic, they're going to have whole steps, half steps, and minor thirds. That's all. And it's going to be mostly whole steps and half steps. Okay, let's look at the 396. It's the G above middle C. 417 is the G sharp above middle C. 528 is a C above middle C. Then this is an E, F sharp, A flat, B flat. That is not a scale. And when you play them one after another, they sound rather not very nice. We'll just leave it at that. So there's no way that those could be a secret code that would be in... Oh, let's go back. They're not in that hymn. No way. All right. We'll move on again. Now let's talk about natural tuning. Everything in music is based on the overtone series, or what we call the harmonic series. Sympathetic vibrational notes, which we call our overtones, above the fundamental are found at some strength in every tone. So if I sing this note, there are several other notes that are in that sound that are resonating sympathetically above it. That's how you can tell the difference between a flute, a clarinet, a trumpet, a piano, a chainsaw, the truckers that set off their jake brakes that come down the hill every day. That's how you identify sounds, by what harmonics are present in those sounds. Keyboard tuners use fifths and adjusted temperaments as desired by the performer. Because before we had equal temperament, which didn't come around until the mid-1800s, you tuned everything by ear, and everyone's idea of tuning was going to be different. Scales are eventually created by tuning octaves and fifths in partials. So you've got they're the different parcels of the harmonic series. Eventually, every note of the scale fills in to get Pythagorean tuning. Temperament, adjust the distance between notes. So these are some things just to help you out as reminders. There must be a main tuning note to begin the process of choosing the concert pitch, where all of the other notes are tuned to that note. So temperament and tuning concert pitch are both involved. Now, we can't deal with that because all of our instruments are equal temperament. The temperament is preset. You can adjust the concert pitch, which is the tuning, depending on if your instrument allows for it. The Zeng bell's main tuning note appears to be the F above middle C, and I think I said that earlier. Okay, here's the harmonic series. So, partial 1, partial 2, 3, 4, that's what these numbers mean. And this is where, the fundamental frequency is a C. If it was an A, you're still going to have an octave. You're going to have a fifth. Then you're going to have a fourth and this major third, minor third, major second, major second, major second. Ooh, we got another major second. Now we got a minor second, major second. You'll notice as you get closer to the top, the intervals get closer. And it goes on until infinity. But there's some version of most of these in a variety of instruments. So take a look at this. Here's the string. This is what it looks like. So here are the present harmonics in a guitar, and a piano, and a violin, and a flute, and a saxophone, and an organ. And the clarinet is going to be close to the organ because they both overblow at the 12th. And I'm not going to get into that. Musical acoustic specialists, they can help you out with that. But notice the difference in how all of these look. These are the harmonics that are present in the sounds of each of these instruments. And you can tell they are very different. And they're all playing the same note in this sample. Okay? So that's just to show you that all of those notes are in there. So my conclusion is Pythagorean or natural tuning was first noted by Pythagoras. And we have early bone flutes that are about 20,000 years old that also appear to use natural tuning. So if natural tuning, Pythagorean tuning, is in nature, I would be a fool to not believe that someone didn't know about it, even if they didn't understand it. Pythagorean tuning was the main method of tuning until the late Renaissance, when keyboard instruments were invented. The hymn to St. John the Baptist was used by Guido of Arezzo in 1000 AD to teach monks how to read music and to learn to sight sing, and I demonstrated my lovely sight singing skills for you. And chapter and verse of the Bible weren't added to the Bible until around 1500 AD. So you see, that's 500 years later. So there's no way the Puleo could have come up with a code. That Guido would have known this code to use to create his pitches. And now that we can actually measure pitches this many years later, yeah. So Hertz frequencies weren't possible to calculate until the mid-1800s. That's when we could begin to see. You can go and you can test the Zeng bells. You know what temperament they're in because you can measure the pitches. Because we know the tuning of the Zeng bells, we can safely say that Guido of Arezzo used the same tuning system in 1000 AD, because remember, he also put it all into sheet music, which we're still using today. And it's all determined, and this determined his method of teaching music reading and sight singing, which we used to call sight screaming in college. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to give a push from a website. So subscribe to this YouTube channel, and you can go to my website, which there's a link to that in the description below, healingfrequenciesmusic.com. I've got buku blog posts on all geeky music things, ancient solfeggial frequencies, the frequencies of creation, all kinds of cool things that I've been writing since 2014. You can order a personal song. You can get a sound bath where I use crystal bowls. I've got classes, all kinds of cool things on the website. So check all of that stuff out. And make sure, again, that you read the blog post that goes with this, because there's some things in that post that are not in this video, and vice versa. And all of the sources for this video are also in there. And some of the sources come out of me just being a musician and having studied music. You know, I went into college as a music major. I won't say the year, but it's been a while. And 3 degrees later, I have a pretty good knowledge of what's going on in the music world. And I'm just glad that I can bring some enlightenment into the solfeggial frequencies and other things that are going on. And if you have any questions about anything musical, or you find some weird thing, just shoot me an email. There's a contact us button on the website, or put it in the link below, and I'll try to, put it in the comment section below, and I'll try to answer it there. But I love the questions, and then I love going and finding out information. And so with that, have a bodacious evening, and we'll see you in the next video.